I still remember the exact moment my wife erased me. Not in private, not in a quiet argument at home, not even in one of those cold silences we had gotten used to over the years. No, she erased me in a courtroom, standing there in front of a judge, calm and composed, wearing that cream blazer she always saved for important days. She looked straight ahead and said something that should have broken me. She said I built nothing, and the strange thing is, for a split second, I almost believed her, because if you looked at my life from the outside, if you looked at the paperwork, the records, the official story, it all pointed to the same conclusion. George Peterson. No company, no patents, no public achievements, no visible success. Just a man sitting quietly at a table while his wife's empire stood tall beside him. But the truth was buried so deep, so carefully hidden behind years of silence and trust that no one in that courtroom could see it. Not the judge, not her lawyer, not even Sandra anymore. But I knew. And soon, they would too. The day she filed for divorce, I was eating a ham sandwich. Nothing symbolic, nothing dramatic, just a cheap sandwich with yellow mustard on white bread because we had run out of everything else. The knock on the door was loud. Too loud for a normal visit. It startled me enough that the mustard packet slipped and stained my shirt. A blue shirt, the one Sandra had given me on our 15th anniversary. Funny what your brain focuses on in moments like that. Not the fact that your marriage is ending, not the weight of the papers in your hand, just a stain. I remember staring at it and thinking, that's never coming out. And maybe that was the moment I understood everything without fully admitting it. Because stains like that don't just happen overnight, they build up slowly, just like resentment, just like distance, just like the quiet death of a marriage. Sandra had hired her lawyer 6 weeks before those papers reached my hands. 6 weeks. That meant she had been planning it while we were still having dinner together, while she was still asking me about my day, while she kissed me goodbye every morning like everything was normal. 19 years of marriage, reduced to strategy, reduced to timing, reduced to paperwork. Her lawyer was exactly the kind of man you would expect. Sharp suit, perfect haircut, the kind of confidence that doesn't come from guessing, but from winning. His name was Brett Evans. And from the moment I saw him, I knew one thing. He thought this would be easy. And honestly, I didn't blame him. Because Sandra had built a very convincing story. A story where she was the self-made success. The visionary architect. The woman who built everything from nothing. And I was just the husband who existed in the background. The man who moved money around. The one who did nothing. That's how they framed it. That's how they wanted the judge to see me. And for a while, that's exactly how it looked. Sandra Peterson Design Group. 41 employees, a downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows. Major contracts, industry awards. Magazine features calling her self-made over and over again. I remember the day that article came out. She had left it on the kitchen counter. I picked it up, read every word, and smiled. Not because I believed it, but because I knew what it left out, what it erased, what it conveniently ignored. The part where it all started in our garage. The part where there was no office. No employees. No reputation, just Sandra. Sitting across from me at our kitchen table with a business plan spread out in front of her, color-coded. Of course it was. Red for risks. Green for projections. Yellow for what she called faith-based assumptions. She looked at me that night with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not confidence, not certainty. "Hope, George," she said, "this is real. I can actually do this." I didn't ask for numbers. I didn't question her projections. I didn't ask for contracts or guarantees. I just looked at her and believed her. Then I wrote a check. $47,000. No agreement. No ownership. No paperwork tying me to what she was about to build, because she was my wife, and that was enough for me. That was the beginning. Over the next 14 years, I funded everything. The first office lease when she said location mattered, the software she needed to compete with bigger firms, the salaries of her first employees when the business couldn't support them yet, the legal battles when contractors tried to push her around, the expansion deals when she wanted to grow faster than the company could afford. Every time there was a risk, I took it. Every time there was a gap, I filled it. Every time things were about to fall apart, I held them together. Not as an investor, not as a business partner, as a husband. And the strange thing is, I never once thought I needed recognition for it, because watching her succeed felt like we were both winning. Her name on the building didn't bother me. Her success didn't threaten me. It made me proud, at least, it used to. Somewhere along the way, things changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. We stopped talking about dreams. We started talking about schedules. We stopped laughing at small things. We started ignoring them. Dinners became shorter. Conversations became colder, and slowly, without either of us saying it out loud, we stopped being partners. She grew into her success, and I became part of her past, something she had outgrown. I felt it long before she admitted it, long before the divorce papers, long before the courtroom. But I stayed, because loyalty can look a lot like stubbornness, and sometimes you don't realize the difference until it's too late. The first day in court was exactly what you would expect. Cold, formal, carefully controlled. Sandra didn't look at me. Not once. She sat there with perfect posture, her hands resting calmly on the table like this was just another business meeting, another negotiation, another deal, and in a way, it was. Her lawyer stood up and began speaking like the outcome was already decided. Your Honor, this is a simple case. It never is. Sandra Peterson built a successful business from the ground up. Pause. Mr. Peterson contributed nothing. Nothing. Not minimal. Not insignificant. Nothing. And the worst part? He said it like it was obvious, like it was proven, like there was no room for argument. He talked about my lack of professional output, my absence from the company's official structure, the fact that my name appeared nowhere in the business, and legally, he wasn't wrong. That was the problem, because everything I had done, everything I had built, existed in a space the law doesn't easily recognize. Trust, support, sacrifice. Those things don't show up on balance sheets, they don't appear in contracts, they don't get recorded in official documents, and without proof, they might as well not exist. I sat there and listened. Quiet. Still, watching, as my life was reduced to a narrative that barely resembled the truth. And then my lawyer leaned over and said something simple. Let them finish. At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant, but I trusted him. Because unlike Sandra's lawyer, he wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress the room. He was waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the truth to matter. And when Sandra's side finally sat down, when they had built their entire story, when they were completely confident in it, that's when everything started to change. Slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly. Because the most powerful shifts don't happen with noise. They happen with evidence. And we had 14 years of it. Waiting in a single box. And the moment that box entered the courtroom, everything began to unravel. The box didn't look like much. That's the first thing I remember when it was brought into the courtroom after lunch, just a standard banker's box, light brown, slightly worn at the edges, the kind you'd find stacked in storage rooms or forgotten corners of offices. Nothing about it suggested power. Nothing about it suggested that it was about to dismantle everything Sandra and her lawyer had built that morning, but I knew what was inside. 14 years. 14 years of checks, transfers, guarantees, messages, proof, the kind of proof that doesn't shout, the kind that quietly sits in front of you and refuses to be ignored. My lawyer stood up slowly, like a man who had no interest in rushing something important. He walked toward the box, opened it, and reached inside. No drama, no theatrics, just calm, deliberate movement. "Your Honor," he said, "I'd like to begin with something simple." He pulled out a single document and placed it on the judge's desk. A check. That was it. Just a check, but I watched Sandra's lawyer lean forward. Slightly, I watched his pen pause, 'cause even before the amount was spoken, he understood what this meant. Dated September 14th, my lawyer continued, written from Mr. George Peterson's personal account to Sandra Peterson Design Group. A pause. $47,000. The courtroom was quiet, not dramatic silence, not tension-filled silence. Just stillness. Because numbers like that don't need explanation. The judge looked at the document carefully, then back at my lawyer. And this represents the founding capital of the company currently being valued at $14 million. That's when it started. Not a reaction, not an outburst, just a subtle shift in the room. Like something invisible had just been placed on the table, and everyone could feel its weight. My lawyer didn't stop, he didn't linger, because he knew one document wasn't enough. It never is. He went back to the box, pulled out another file. "This," he said, "is the lease agreement for the company's first commercial office." He handed it to the judge, signed October 2011. A pause. "The personal guarantor on this lease is Mr. George Peterson, not Sandra. Not the company Medierini. The man who built nothing. I didn't look at Sandra. I didn't look at her lawyer. Kept my eyes forward, because I didn't need to see their reactions. I could feel them." My lawyer continued, "Your Honor, over the next several years, there were multiple instances where the company was unable to meet its financial obligations." He placed several documents on the desk. Payroll advances, direct transfers, personal funds used to cover operational shortages. He spoke each number, clearly, carefully, not rushed, not exaggerated, just fact after fact. $218,000. 5 separate transfers. Employee, salaries covered. Business, continuity maintained. These individuals, he said, gesturing slightly, continued working because Mr. Peterson ensured they were paid. And that's when something changed, because now it wasn't just about numbers. It was about people. Real people. Careers that continued. Lives that weren't disrupted, all because of decisions I made quietly. Without recognition, Sandra's lawyer shifted in his seat, not dramatically, but enough. Enough. For someone paying attention, and I was paying attention. Because I had spent my entire career reading people in moments like this. Negotiations. Deals. Pressure. Points. That slight movement? That was recalculation. My lawyer went back to the box again, and this time, he took his time. Because what came next wasn't just evidence. It was memory. "Your Honor," he said, "I'd like to present a series of communications between Mr. and Mrs. Peterson. Sandra's lawyer stood up. Objection. On what basis? The judge asked calmly. A pause. That was all it took, because there wasn't a good answer. The judge looked at him for a moment, then said quietly, "Sit down." And just like that, the momentum shifted. My lawyer handed over printed emails, text messages, time-stamped, verified. Real. These communications, he said, span several years and reflect Mrs. Peterson's own acknowledgement of Mr. Peterson's role in the creation and growth of the business. He flipped to one page. Didn't read everything, just one line. Because sometimes, one line is enough. You are the reason any of this exists. Didn't look at me when he read it. He didn't look at Sandra either. He just let it sit there. In the air. In the silence. Unavoidable. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not satisfaction. Not victory. Something heavier, because those weren't just words. They were real. She had meant them when she said them, at least at the time. And now they were being used to expose her. That's the complicated part about truth. It doesn't care when it's convenient. It just exists. I kept my face. Neutral, exactly like my lawyer told me. Do nothing. So I did nothing. But Sandra. She moved, just slightly. Her hands tightened on the table. Her shoulders shifted. And for the first time that day, she looked up, not at the judge, not at her lawyer, at me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something harder to define. Recognition, like she was seeing something she had tried to forget. Something she had convinced herself didn't matter anymore, and now it was right in front of her, impossible to ignore. My lawyer continued presenting documents, one after another, each one small on its own. But together, they told a story, a clear one, a complete one, a story that didn't match the one her lawyer had told that morning. And the more he presented, the quieter the courtroom became, because now everyone understood something important. This wasn't about interpretation anymore. This wasn't about perspective. This was about proof. Sandra's lawyer stopped taking notes. That's when I knew, because men like him always write, always adjust, always plan their next move, but when the pen stops, it means the strategy is breaking, and he knew it. We weren't done, not even close, because everything so far, that was just the foundation. The real turning point was still coming. My lawyer reached into the box one more time, and this time, he pulled out something different, not a document, not a printed page, something smaller, something almost insignificant. But I knew what it was. And the moment I saw it, I felt my heartbeat change, because this wasn't just evidence. This was something else entirely, something personal, something undeniable. A recording. He held it for a second, then placed it gently on the table. "Your Honor," he said, "this is a voicemail message left by Mrs. Peterson on Mr. Peterson's phone." Sandra's lawyer looked up immediately. Sharp, alert. From March 6th, my lawyer continued. The same day Mrs. Peterson's company secured its largest contract to date. I saw Sandra freeze, not visibly, not dramatically, but completely, like every part of her had gone still at once, because she knew, before anyone pressed play, she knew exactly what was on that recording, and that's when it hit me. Not the victory, not the outcome, but the reality of what was about to happen. Because up until now, this had been about numbers, documents, facts, but this was her voice, her words, her truth. Unfiltered, unprepared, unavoidable. My lawyer looked at the judge. We have the original file, timestamp verification, and supporting records confirming its authenticity. The judge nodded slowly. Sandra's lawyer didn't object this time. because he couldn't, and he knew it. The room felt different now, heavier, like something important was about to break. Lawyer reached for the device, paused for just a moment, and then he pressed play. And in that instant, everything changed. The sound of her voice filled the courtroom before anyone was ready for it. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was soft, warm, familiar. George. We got it, just 3 words, but they carried years inside them. I felt my fingers tighten slightly on the edge of the table, because I hadn't heard that message in a long time. Not since the day she sent it, back when everything still felt shared, back when success still belonged. To both of us, the recording continued. I don't even know what to say. I'm sitting in the parking lot and I can't stop shaking. There was a small laugh, nervous, excited, the same laugh she used to have when something good happened. They signed. They actually signed. This changes everything. The courtroom remained completely silent. No papers moving, no whispers, just her voice. And I know this only happened because of you. Sandra's shoulders dropped slightly. Her eyes closed for just a second. Not long, but enough. I kept thinking about what you told me, about taking the risk, about not being afraid. And you were right. You were right about all of it. The judge leaned forward slightly, listening. Not as a judge now, as a person hearing something honest. I don't say it enough, but you built this with me. Every late night, every dollar, every time I thought we were going to fail. You were there. I saw Sandra's lawyer slowly lower his pen. He wasn't even pretending to take notes anymore, because there was nothing to argue with, nothing to reinterpret. It was her voice. Her words, clear, direct, undeniable. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Before the press release, before the team, before anyone else. Because this is ours. There was a pause in the recording, a small breath, then the line that ended everything. I love you, and I couldn't have done this without you. The recording clicked off, and the silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had come before. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the air felt still. Didn't look at Sandra. I didn't look at anyone. I kept my eyes on the table in front of me, because if I looked at her, I wasn't sure what I'd see, and I didn't want to risk it. The judge cleared his throat softly. Not loudly, just enough to break the moment. Sandra's lawyer stood up. For the first time that day, he looked uncertain. Your Honor, he said, while this message reflects emotional support, it does not necessarily establish legal ownership. The judge raised a hand. He didn't let him finish. I understand the distinction. Counselor, his voice was calm, measured, but it does establish something else. A pause. It establishes credibility. Sandra's lawyer sat down, slowly, because he understood exactly what that meant. This wasn't just about legal technicalities anymore. This was about narrative, about truth, about which version of events felt real, and right now, only one version did. My lawyer didn't speak immediately. He let the silence sit. He let the weight of the recording settle. Then he stepped forward again. Your Honor, we are not arguing that Mr. Peterson should receive ownership of the company. Sandra looked up quickly. That surprised her. I saw it, because she had been expecting a fight for controls. Battle, but that wasn't the plan. We are simply asking that the court recognize Mr. Peterson's financial and operational contributions when determining equitable distribution. The judge nodded slightly. That was reasonable. Measured. Difficult to reject. Sandra's lawyer leaned toward her and whispered something. She shook her head slightly, not aggressively, just quietly. And that's when I realized something. She wasn't fighting anymore. Not really. The energy had left her. Not defeated. Just exhausted. The judge looked down at his notes, then back at both sides. "I'd like to take a short recess." He paused. 30 minutes. The gavel tapped lightly, and just like that, the courtroom broke into motion. Chairs moved. Papers gathered. People whispered. But I stayed seated. My lawyer leaned toward me. "That went better than expected." I nodded. "Once, because I didn't trust myself to speak yet." He stood. "I'm going to step outside. They may want to talk." He gave me a look. "Don't react. Let me handle it." Then he walked away. I remained where I was. Sandra didn't leave immediately. She sat there, staring at the table, her hands folded, still. Finally, she stood, and for a moment, I thought she would walk past me, but she didn't. She stopped beside my table, close enough that I could hear her breathing. "George," just my name, nothing else. I looked up slowly. Her eyes were red, not crying, but close. "Forgot that message existed," she said quietly. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know what answer mattered. She exhaled. "I meant it." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know," I said. That seemed to hit her harder than anything else. She looked down, then back at me. "You could have used that years ago." "Yes." "You didn't." "No." A long pause. "Why now?" I held her gaze. "Because you said I built nothing." The words hung between us. She flinched slightly. "Not dramatically, just enough." Shouldn't have said that. "No." Another pause. People moved around us, but for a moment, it felt like we were the only two in the room. She swallowed. If this goes the way it's looking, what happens?" I answered honestly. "You keep the company." She looked surprised. "All of it?" "Yes, and you?" "I get what I put in." She nodded slowly. It seemed to matter to her more than I expected. "I never wanted to destroy you," she said. I didn't respond, because intentions don't erase actions. She seemed to understand that. After a moment, she stepped back. "My lawyer will talk to yours." I nodded once. She turned and walked away. And for the first time since this started, I felt something unexpected. Not victory, not anger, relief, because this was no longer about revenge. It was about balance, about truth being acknowledged, about closing a chapter. Without burning everything in it, my lawyer returned 10 minutes later. "They want to settle." I looked at him. "Now?" He nodded. "They know the judge is leaning your way." I leaned back slightly. "And?" "They're offering recognition of your contributions and a financial settlement." I exhaled slowly. "How much?" He told me, and for a moment, I said nothing, because it wasn't small, it wasn't symbolic. It was real, substantial. Fair. More than I expected. Less than everything. Exactly right. "What do you think?" he asked. I looked across the room. Sandra was standing near the window, talking quietly with her lawyer. She didn't look over, but she didn't need to. I already knew. "Let's hear the details," I said. My lawyer nodded, and just like that, the end of the fight began. Negotiations don't look the way people imagine. There's no shouting, no dramatic ultimatums, just quiet voices, measured words, and numbers that carry more weight than emotions ever could. We sat in a smaller room this time. No audience, no judge. Just 4 people at a table. Me, Sandra, and the 2 lawyers who now understood that this wasn't a battle anymore. It was a conclusion. Sandra didn't look at me when we sat down. Not immediately. She kept her eyes on the documents in front of her. Her lawyer spoke first. "Given the developments this afternoon, we're prepared to revise our position." Carefully chosen words. He wasn't admitting defeat, but he wasn't pretending strength anymore either. My lawyer nodded slightly. "Go ahead." A folder slid across the table. I didn't open it right away. I watched Sandra instead, because numbers matter, but people matter more. She looked tired. Not physically, something deeper than that. Like someone who had been holding on to a version of reality for too long, and it had finally slipped out of her hands. "George," her lawyer continued, "this offer reflects acknowledgement of your financial contributions to the formation and sustainability of the company." Acknowledgement. That word again. It meant more than the number attached to it. I opened the folder. The figure was printed cleanly on the first page. Clear, direct, final. I read it once. Then again, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to feel how it landed. And it landed exactly where it should. Not too high, not too low. Fair. My lawyer leaned slightly toward me. "You don't have to decide immediately." I nodded. But I already knew. Sandra finally spoke. "Is it enough?" Her voice was quiet, careful. I looked up at her. For a moment, neither of us said anything, because the question wasn't really about money. It was about everything behind it. Years, effort, trust, loss. I closed the folder gently. "It's not about enough." She held my gaze. "Then what is it about?" "Truth." The room went still again. Not uncomfortable, just honest. She nodded slowly, like she understood that. Maybe for the first time in a long time. "I can agree to that," she said. Her lawyer shifted slightly, probably expecting more negotiation, more back and forth. But there wasn't going to be any, because this wasn't a deal being forced. It was one being accepted. My lawyer spoke next. "We'd like to include a formal statement acknowledging Mr. Peterson's role in the company's development." Sandra's lawyer started to respond, but Sandra stopped him with a small gesture. "It's fine." She didn't even look at him. She looked at me. I should have said it a long time ago. I didn't respond. Not because I disagreed, but because some things don't need to be repeated. They just need to be done. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "We can include a statement." Yes, he made a note, trying to maintain structure, control. But even he knew. The direction of this was already decided. My lawyer leaned back slightly. "One more point." Sandra's lawyer looked up. "The timeline for payment." There it was. The practical part. The part that makes everything real. 30 days, Sandra's lawyer said. My lawyer looked at me. I nodded once. "That works." No hesitation. No push for more, because dragging it out wouldn't change anything. It would just delay the inevitable. Sandra exhaled slowly, a breath she had probably been holding all day. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and for the first time since this started, she looked lighter. Not happy, not relieved, just less burdened. The documents were adjusted, terms clarified, language reviewed. Every word mattered. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about how this story would exist after today. On paper, in record, in memory. Sandra picked up her pen, paused for just a second, then signed. No drama, no hesitation. Just a simple motion that closed 19 years. She slid the document across the table. I picked up the pen. For a brief moment, I looked at my name printed there. George Peterson. Strange how something so simple can carry so much weight. I signed, and just like that, it was done. No applause, no reaction, just silence. The kind of silence that follows something final. The lawyers gathered the documents, shook hands, professional, efficient, routine, like this was just another case. But it wasn't, not for us. Sandra stood up. I did too. For a moment, we just stood there. Two people who had built something together, and then spent years pretending we hadn't. "I meant what I said earlier," she said quietly. I knew what she was referring to. "I know," another pause. "I'm glad it ended like this." I considered that for a moment. Me too, and I was. Because it could have ended differently. Angrier, messier, more destructive. But it didn't, and that mattered. She gave a small nod, then turned and walked toward the door. This time, she didn't stop, and neither did I. I watched her leave, not with regret, not with longing, Just acceptance. Because some stories don't end with people staying. They end with people understanding. My lawyer placed a hand on my shoulder. "You handled that well." I gave a small nod. "Let's finish the formalities," he said. I followed him out of the room, through the hallway, past the courtroom, and as the doors closed behind me, I felt something shift. Not externally. Nothing had changed in the world. But internally, everything had. Because for the first time in years, there was no argument left. No misunderstanding. No version of the story that erased me. Just truth, clear, simple, final. And sometimes, that's the only victory that matters. The building felt quieter when I walked out, not because anything had changed, but because I had. It's strange how that works. Same hallway, same doors, same people moving in and out of their own problems. But everything felt distant, like I was no longer part of that world. Like I had stepped out of something that had been holding me in place for years. My lawyer said something as we reached the exit. I don't even remember what it was. Something about paperwork, timelines, final filings, important things, necessary things. But in that moment, none of it mattered, because the real work had already been done. I shook his hand. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. "You were patient. That's what made the difference." Maybe he was right. Or maybe I just didn't know how to fight any other way. Either way, it was over now. I stepped outside. The air felt different, cooler, cleaner, or maybe I just noticed it for the first time in a long time. People walked past me without looking. Cars moved. Life continued. Exactly as it always does. No one knew what had just happened inside that building. No one knew that 19 years had just been reduced to a signature and a number. And that's the thing about endings. They're rarely loud. They don't announce themselves. They just happen quietly. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. Not thinking, not planning, just existing. Because for the first time in years, there was nothing left to figure out. No problem to solve. No tension sitting in the background. Just space. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. There was a notification, an email. Subject line, settlement confirmation. I didn't open it, not yet, because I didn't need to see it to know it was real. I had been there. I had signed it. That was enough. Instead, I opened something else. My messages. Scrolled back. Not recent ones, older, years old. Back to a time when everything was different. When conversations were longer, warmer, full of plans instead of distance. I found the thread, Sandra. I didn't read everything. Just a few lines. Random ones. Fragments of a life that used to exist. Did you eat? Don't forget the meeting. I'm proud of you. Simple things. Normal things. The kind of things people don't realize matter until they're gone. I closed the phone, not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. And that's how I knew. It was really over. Not legally. That had already been handled, emotionally, completely. There was no anger left. No need to prove anything. No desire to go back and change a single moment. Because everything that happened led here to clarity, to balance, to truth. And strangely, I wouldn't trade that, even if it came at a cost. I started walking. No destination in mind. Just moving forward, step by step. Because that's all there is after something ends. Forward. At some point, I passed a small cafe. Nothing special. Just a quiet place with a few tables outside. I stopped, looked at it for a second, then walked in, sat down, ordered coffee, black, no sugar, the same way I always had it, the same way she used to complain about. "You'll ruin your stomach," she used to say. I almost smiled at the memory. The cup arrived. I wrapped my hands around it, warm, steady, real. I took a sip, and for a moment, everything felt exactly the way it should. Not perfect, not ideal, just right. A few minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time wasn't important anymore. I reached into my pocket again, pulled out something I hadn't looked at in years, a small folded piece of paper. worn at the edges, faded slightly. I opened it carefully. It was a copy of that first check. $47,000. The beginning. I stared at it for a moment, then folded it back up. And for the first time since I had kept it, I didn't feel anything attached to it. No pride, no regret. No sense of loss, just acknowledgement. It happened. It mattered, and now it was done. I placed it back in my pocket, finished my coffee, stood up, and walked out. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the street. Everything looked different, not because it was, but because I was seeing it without weight, without history pulling on it, without anything tying me back. I stopped at the corner, looked both ways, and for a brief second, I thought about everything that had led here. The kitchen table, the late nights, the risks, the silence, the courtroom, the voice on that recording. All of this is ours. She had meant it. At the time, it was true. And maybe that's the lesson. Not everything that ends was false. Some things are real, just not permanent. I took a breath, stepped forward, and crossed the street. No hesitation, no looking back, because there was nothing behind me that needed revisiting. Everything important had already been faced, already been said, already been understood. And ahead, there was no plan, no big vision, no immediate goal, just something simpler. Freedom, the kind that doesn't come from winning, but from letting go, and that's the part most people don't talk about. Revenge stories usually end with someone losing, someone being destroyed, someone walking away victorious. But that's not what this was. This wasn't about destroying Sandra. It wasn't about taking everything from her. It wasn't about proving she was wrong. It was about making sure the truth existed, clearly, undeniably, and once it did, there was nothing left to fight for. Because real closure doesn't come from taking more. It comes from needing less. I reached the other side of the street, kept walking, blended into the movement of people going about their lives. And just like that, my story became something else. Not a battle, not a loss, not even a victory, just a chapter that ended exactly the way it needed to. With truth, with balance, with silence, and with a man who was finally no longer invisible.